Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here with a review of the Legendary Ranger Action Hero Figures Wave 4. So we are continuing with the releases of past Ranger figures, mainly Reds and 6th, in this case 1/6. So this wave includes Zeo Ranger 5 Red, Red Lightspeed Rescue Ranger, Red Wild Force Ranger, Red Ninja Storm Ranger, Jungle Fury Red Ranger, RPM Ranger Red, and Samurai Gold. So I'm going to pretty much structure this review like last time. I'm going to go over the articulation for one of them to start off because they all share the same mold, and in the case of these they are pretty much all identical. There's no real difference like there was in the last wave where we had something like Robo Knight who had at least a little bit of a difference in what he might represent. So we'll do that, and then we'll take a look at all of them on their own and do a comparison to their previous main figure version. So yeah, let's go ahead. I'm going to use Zeo for the articulation since he's not holding anything and he's not really in that much of a pose. So this is the same base mold as all the figures we've had so far from Super Megaforce and the last ones, and it's a pretty solid little mold. You have a nice hinge joint here. You get some great outward movement here. You can rotate around 360. You've got a single elbow joint right here. You can swivel. His head can go around 360. You can't really move it up and down though. And then you can rotate his leg here on this nice little hinge ball joint here. So you get a pretty wide range of motion. Single knee joint there. You can swivel his foot. You cannot swivel his waist. So pretty much the standard. It's pretty decent articulation, not the best, but not the worst either. And all of them have the same exact articulation offerings, and I do not have any loose joint problems with any of them. Some of them are slightly looser than the others, but there's nothing really to write home about in terms of it being terrible. Alright, so now we will go ahead and take a look at everyone individually, starting with Zeo Red. Alright, so starting with Zeo Ranger 5, this is honestly probably one of my more favorite figures here in this wave. It's pretty well done. The ones you had before to choose from really weren't anything to write home about, so this is pretty much the best you're going to get. But I think he's all pretty well proportioned. Let's check out his back right now. But his helmet's pretty nicely done. They did a good job of representing how the star is spread. If you look at it too long, it can look a little strange and disproportioned, but then if you're not really thinking about it, it also looks pretty well proportioned. So there's that. It just seems a little bit strange, but other than that I think they got it pretty well done. The proportions on it are pretty well done. Everything else is pretty nicely done there. You can see the little details on its gold chest armor. So there's not really too much I think they did wrong with it. Overall, I'm actually really pleased with this figure, and I think it's the best Zeo Ranger 5 figure we have of this scale. Correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like there was a poll about doing a Super Legends Red Zeo Ranger, and he was one of the choices, you know, back when we had the Chaser line, so it's kind of nice to actually finally have a figure somewhat like that. As for what he comes with, he essentially just comes with the two sidearms of the Zeo Rangers, both of which are done up in white. You can see the blaster there. There's a little peg to put on the side. He's got two pegs, as you can see there, and then the baton. My only real complaint about this figure in particular is actually just I wish he would have came with his main weapon, just because I think that would have been a lot cooler than just these sidearms. But overall, I'm pretty pleased with the figure. I think he's pretty solid. Now we'll just take a quick comparison here to his old counterpart, which I actually just recently shot the review for, the old Zeo figures. So here is the old basic Zeo figures. As you can see, quite an improvement. If you watch the review, you know, these are very strange looking figures, and the only other real alternatives besides this one were the old flippable head ones, which were also really bulky and strangely proportioned, and the ones that came with the bikes, which weren't terrible figures, but they were just kind of smaller and strange. So I think this is definitely the best Zeo 5 we've gotten, so I definitely recommend picking him up if you want something of this scale. Definitely, probably, it's really weird sounding. Anyway, probably the most improved out of all of them from their old counterpart. Alright, so now let's go ahead and move on to Lightspeed Rescue. Alright, now we move on to the Lightspeed Rescue Red Ranger, which honestly is probably one of the stronger figures of this wave as well. I did really like Zeo 5, and this one is, like I said, a stronger figure as well. His design is pretty basic, so it's pretty difficult to mess him up in a lot of ways, and there's not really a lot to him, but he looks pretty solid. Proportionately, he's well done. The colors all look nice. I really don't have any issues with the way he's done. He's an improvement over his old version, which I'll show in a minute, and like I said, there's nothing really too wrong with him. He's not one of my favorite designs, but he's probably one of the better figures out of this wave. He's fairly well done. I don't really have any particular issue to mention. He doesn't have any of the weird helmet proportion issues that some of the ones in the wave will have. He does come with 2 weapons. He's got the generic Lightspeed Rescue Blaster weapon here, the Rescue Blaster, which can go on the side with the peg there. And then he actually does come with a V-Lancer, you probably saw at the beginning of the review, which is done in gold plastic, which is really cool that he came with that. It seems a smidge short, maybe. It could just be me. But still, it's a neat accessory that they included with it, and I think it's nice. It's a fitting one, since Lightspeed Rescue didn't really have that much individualized weapons besides that and maybe the components of the rescue bird. But anyway, here he is next to his old counterpart from the original Lightspeed Rescue line. Now this is actually the figure that came with the bike, but it's identical to the core 5-inch figures, because that was back in the day when they essentially put the same figure with the bike. The only difference between him and the other ones is that his head does not light up. But as you can see, there's quite a difference there. This was back during the more muscular days of the figures. I don't think this is really a terrible figure, but it's definitely more of a streamlined look and closer to what the show's like in a way. And it's more of an improvement over this one. Although definitely not quite the drastic gap between the Zeo Ranger ones, that's for sure. Alright, so now let's go ahead and we will move on to Wild Force. Alright, next up we have the Wild Force Red Ranger, which I think is another pretty solid figure for the line. He does have a bit strange bits to him, but overall I'm pretty pleased with it. I like how every time I get to start talking about it, they end up at the back. I'll have to plan that better. But his head sculpt is, for the most part, pretty well done. Proportionately, it looks great and really show accurate and really well done. The only note I really had was about these stripes up here. I didn't remember them from the show, and I looked it up, and in pictures, sometimes it appears close to that in more of a gold color. Sometimes it doesn't appear at all. So I think they had the right idea when they were going for those stripes at the top that are sort of almost brown looking, but I think they took it too far. Like, it's almost too blatant. It's not really that huge of an issue, and it's nice to have that detail there, but I just think that it's just a bit too almost bright. I'm not sure. But other than that, the head sculpt looks great. The rest of the details look good. He's a pretty solid looking figure. He's actually a really nice Wild Force Red Ranger figure. Other than that just seeming too bright to me. Who knows, it could just be me being a little bit nitpicky about that. For the weapons he comes with, as you can see, he has his main weapon on there, which is just sort of held on there by his hand, which is red plastic, and it's honestly pretty small for me. It seems like it should be a little bit bigger, especially with the one that actually came with his original release. He also does have his crystal saber, which is done up in gold. If I can get it to hold there, as you can see here, which is not bad. It's funny because they need these pegs to stay in the side, but it's really annoying when you want to display them because they have these just kind of tumors sticking off of them. But that is what he gets there. But for the most part, he's actually one of the better looking figures of the line. It's just I'm slightly bugged by those bright helmet stripes. I guess it just depends on what picture you're looking at online or what angle you're seeing him in the show, if it's really present. Because like I said, some of them, it didn't even look like the lines were that color. It looked like it was just a darker red. So here is a comparison next to his original 5-inch version here from the Wild Force line, and I left the weapon in there. As you can see, it's quite a bit bigger. That's what she said. But so just based on the show and based on this weapon, I feel like that could have been larger. But it's a definite improvement. You can see this one is part of the old muscly figures, and he's got a sort of strangely proportioned head. So this one is a definite improvement over the old one, and you can see here they do have the stripes here, but they just don't seem to be quite as bright. So that was really my only complaint about this figure, is I felt like the stripes could have been much less bright. So anyway, that about wraps it up for this guy. So now we'll move on to Ninja Storm. Alright, now we are on to Ninja Storm Red, which is honestly probably my least favorite figure of the line. I think he honestly does not look that great. I'm gonna say right here, I actually don't have a comparison figure for this. I never got all of the original Ninja Storm 5-inch figures. I used the hang glider figures from Hurricaneger, and my red one actually broke. So this is the only one I do not have a comparison for. But I do know what they look like. And honestly, his head sculpt is really just the weakest. As you can see, it just looks really bland. It looks really cheap. There should be some sort of color or better way to determine the line there of where his mouthpiece is. It looks very strange and really cheap looking. They did happen to get the arms here right, though. They got sort of a nice textured look and feel to it for what they look like. So that's not bad. The morph is rather blandly painted, but as you can see, my main problems there with the head sculpt. Everything else is pretty much okay. There's nothing really terribly wrong with the rest of his body details, but it's just the head that really makes him look cheap. As you can see, there's a hole on the back there for his sword, which is the only weapon he comes with, which is his ninja sword. Not even in its sheath, it's just red with the silver there. So it's pretty weak. I just feel like overall, if you look at this figure, it looks pretty cheap in comparison to some of the other ones. Honestly, not the best effort. I feel like I would be seeing this as a bootleg figure, and it's probably the weakest of this set and possibly the weakest overall so far. Like I said, I do not have a direct comparison, but I do know what they look like, and I actually kind of prefer both the Hurricane Ranger glider figures and the original Ninja Storm 5-inch figures. But yeah, that's about it for Ninja Storm. I guess now we will head to Jungle Fury. Alright, now we have the Jungle Fury Red Ranger, which from the start was going to have a tough time with me. If you watch any of my reviews, you know that the Jungle Fury 5-inch line of figures is my absolute favorite 5-inch line, favorite 5-inch mold, so this one was going to have a bit of a tough critique from me. And overall, it's a pretty decent figure. It's not spectacularly awful or anything, it's honestly pretty solid. Nowhere near as good as the older ones, but it's still pretty solid. The head sculpt is done pretty decently. It's a little bit strangely proportioned, but nothing that I can't forgive. All the other details are pretty well done. You got the black stripes, even the white outline. Like I said, there's nothing really too bad about it. He's honestly pretty solid, and I'm pretty pleased with him overall. The only real problem is his head sculpt is slightly strange, and he does not feature my favorite mold, which was really well done, in particular for these Rangers. Just the old mold worked really well. But this one is pretty solid, I have to say. It's not quite as bad as I thought, and I wasn't as harsh as I thought I was going to be on it. The only thing that he comes with are the Jungle Chucks right here, which are his main weapon, which are just sort of this red plastic. And then he does get a set of the Jungle Tonfas, which you can have in either mode. These ones, which is what blue uses, and then the combined mode, which is what yellow uses. I don't remember if it goes like this or this, but you can also use it as a handy weight bar. I don't remember if he actually ever used these in the show. If he did, it was very minimal because his core weapon was the Jungle Chucks. So I would have rather swapped these out for a possible Shark Saber. So that could have been cool. But here is a comparison next to the Jungle Fury 5-inch figure from the Jungle Fury line right here. And it's clearly the superior one from my point of view. Like I said, I think this was the absolute best mold they ever made for Power Rangers figures. It was nice and streamlined. It looked a lot like the show. The only real problem is the color discrepancies a bit, but overall, these were fantastic figures, and this one, just in my opinion, doesn't really stack up to the best mold that PR had to offer. But honestly, it is still pretty solid figure. Alright, now we will go on to get in gear with RPM. Alright, so here we have RPM Ranger Red from, obviously, RPM, which actually, for me, is another one of the weaker figures in the line. Not quite as weak as the Ninja Storm figure, but definitely my second least favorite. Why? Because his head sculpt looks anorexic. Once he turns around here, you'll be able to see his head sculpt is pretty strange looking. Detail-wise, it looks okay. But it's just way too skinny, especially around the chin. It looks like he decided to all of a sudden be bulimic or something. And the helmet is super skinny and strange looking. You can see the backs there, pretty barren. The rest of him isn't bad. It definitely doesn't look quite as good with the seatbelt parts being directly painted on, whereas the old one was a little bit texture to it. But overall, it's okay at best on the rest of it, but he's really strange looking in the face. He doesn't quite have that bootleg look that the Ninja Storm one had, but he's definitely very strange looking. Accessories wise, he obviously comes with his sword right here. That he's holding, which has the red red handle, and then the silver blade there, which isn't bad looking. Nothing really too bad to say about it itself. He does also have, let me stop that quick, the Nitro Blaster, which is right here, which can go on the side of him with this little peg, which is all done up in red. But now we're going to bring in the comparison for him, which is the original RPM 5-inch figures from the RPM line, which until now was actually the last 5-inch figures we got, and the RPM mold is my second favorite PR 5-inch figure mold of all time. So here is the original 5-inch RPM figure, which I think is clearly superior. The head sculpt is a lot better done. It's a lot more accurate, just looks a lot better, and the belt here actually has a texture to it. It protrudes off of it. So just a lot better of a figure, especially when you look at next to it this guy, or if you look at a picture of the helmet from the show. It's very, very oddly proportioned, so I think this is definitely one of the weaker parts of this line. It's just, I'm not really a huge fan of it. I think the helmet strange proportion just really does it for me. But anyway, let's go ahead and move on to the final one with Antonio's Golden Moment. Alright, now we have here, last but certainly not least, Antonio, the Gold Samurai Ranger, and honestly, probably my favorite figure of this wave. I'm really a big fan of Antonio's, and I really like the suit, and I thought it would be cool to get a 5-inch version of Samurai Gold, and honestly, it is really nice looking. They got the gold paint a lot better than the first version, first of all, and the helmet sculpt is very well done. It's very nicely proportioned, very accurate. The rest of the paint on him is pretty well done. Honestly, I don't have any huge complaints about this figure. Like I said, proportion-wise, he looks good. Paint-wise, he looks good. I'm just very pleased with it. It's a very nice figure. There's no strange paint mistakes or any weird anorexic or non-painted helmets. He's just a very nice Gold Ranger figure. Similar to the Samurai Ranger figure, Red Samurai rather, excuse me. It's nice to see sort of a what if they had done a 5-inch line with Samurai, and that is just really nice, and I'm really pleased with this figure overall. Definitely very nice looking. Accessories wise, he pretty much just comes with his Barracuda blade here with its sheath. It does come out, so you can pose him with both pieces if you want to, and it's got a little peg there that corresponds to a hole on the figure's back, so that's really nice. It's not really very well painted, and in fact the old 4-inch version actually had a nicely painted one, but still it's nice that he has that, and the figure is an overall improvement, as I will be able to show here. With the 4-inch Samurai Gold figure. Now, I feel like they did do a second version, if I remember right, that was a little bit better, but this is the first one that came out, and as you can see, the gold coloring on the new 5-inch version is a lot more accurate and a lot more gold-like. This one's almost kind of a bronze. It's a very basic type of generic looking sort of dull gold, but this one is much more show accurate to what it looks like, and I think a much better representation, so I definitely think it's a step up, and like I said, Gold Samurai is probably my favorite of this wave. Alright, so now let's go ahead and we will move on to the final version. Alright, so that about wraps it up. So overall, this wave was a pretty mixed bag. It had some figures in it that I really liked, and some that I found to be really strange, which actually tends to be the overall consensus for me for all of the ones released so far. So it's really up to you. I think there's some ones that are definitely worth picking up for a better representation, but some other ones that were poorly done. I just kind of wish that the line in general would have had a little bit more quality across the board, but still nice to have the figures, so it's up to you which ones you really want for your collection, but overall I found this wave to be a pretty mixed bag for me, personally. But that about wraps it up. Until next time, make sure you check out the Crazy Podcast at writersrangersrambles.com, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, this is Dawson Ryder, signing out.